Hey, what's up? This is PDXguitarfreak, and welcome to my fourth video showing you patches I've created for the Line 6 Pod HD500. Now these patches will also work on the HD500X, but you have to convert them first. If you're not familiar with how to do that, I did a video on it recently, and I'll put a link to that down below in the video description section, the About section. Now a lot has changed since the last time I did one of these HD500 patches videos. My approach has changed a lot. In the past, I always used my half stack, PV 100 watt JSX head, the Satriani head, and 412 cabinet as a monitor when I was making my patches. Well, the problem with that is running the pod through a half stack, which sounds amazing in my opinion, is remarkably different than the sound you're going to get when you run it right into your sound card. So what I do now to help assist myself and hopefully others in creating patches that are better suited for direct recording, I now use as a monitor some powered studio monitors, M-Audio BX5 monitors. Therefore, my sound while I'm creating the patches is more representative, or sounds more like your typical decent PC speakers. So one of the other changes that I've done in my approach is the way I use the expression pedal. In the past, I was using the expression pedal a lot to move you within one patch from a rhythm to a lead tone. I thought I was being creative, and it was creative, and I still do it occasionally. But what I found is that you can't change certain parameters with that expression pedal, like the sag and the bias controls. So now what I do is I'm doing the old-fashioned one patch for rhythm, one patch for lead. That way I can have more control over different parameters that aren't controllable by the expression pedal. However, I still use that expression pedal quite a bit to change amp and effect parameters within any single patch. They're highly interactive patches, so I recommend that if you're going to use them, you watch the section of this video that pertains to that patch so you can get the most out of it. Finally, it's worth mentioning that the guitar I'm using in the sound clips you're about to hear is a Paul Reed Smith Custom 24 guitar, and mostly I'm using the bridge pickup, the humbucker. It's called an HFS, which stands for Hot Fat Screams. Despite the name, I wouldn't call it a super high output pickup. It's more of a medium output, maybe slightly hotter than your typical PAF. So keep in mind when you're listening to these patches, if for example you're using a really high output, super aggressive pickup, you might want to back the gain down a little bit. And conversely, if you're using a single coil pickup with a lighter output, you might want to start these patches with a little more gain. So with that, let's go. First up, we have the MP hybrid patches, MP hybrid rhythm and MP hybrid lead. The MP stands for Mesa Plexi, and that's because I'm combining two different amp models here. The tread plate, based on the Mesa Boogie dual rectifier head, and the Plexi Lead 100 Bright, which is based on the classic Marshall Super Lead 1959 head. 1959 was just a model number. The head actually didn't come out until 1965, and it remained a very popular amp through the 70s. I first gave you a preview of the combination of the tread plate and the Plexi together in my EVH Striped Series guitar review, but since then I've done a lot of adjustments to the patch, so it's significantly different now. My original inspiration to put together the combination of the tread plate and the Plexi, well, I started with the Plexi head when it first came out, and I thought, wow, that's really cool classic sounding head, but what if it just had a little more punch and a little more gain to it, rather than put a distortion pedal in front of the Plexi, which in my opinion, putting a distortion pedal in front of an amp it should be a last resort. And typically the only time I ever do that, whether it's in real life or when doing amp models, is when I have a good tone already and I just want a tiny bit more gain to take my lead playing a little bit over the edge. In this case, that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for more punch, and I don't think you typically get that from a distortion pedal. So what I did is I took the tread plate, which I knew was a punchy amp, and I just decided to put it side by side with the Plexi and blend them together, and I've been really happy with that ending result. First thing we have in the chain is a noise gate, which is always on. I keep the decay down at about 15%. And what that does is help not only reduce the noise level, but it also helps kind of tighten up the sound a little bit, which for me is better when you're playing high gain rhythm stuff. Next we go into the amps. On the tread plate side, you can see I'm using the 87 condenser mic and the 412 Tread V30 cabinet. On the Plexi side, I'm using the 412 Greenback 25 classic type of speaker setup with the old Celestians, and the 57 off-axis based on the Shure SM57 mic. So it's kind of a real classic Marshall type of setup there. And I'm really using the sag and the bias controls a lot more these days now that I understand them better. So I have the sag dropped all the way on the tread plate side, which does help tighten up the rhythm tone. Increasing the sag gives you more of a liquidy sound, which in my opinion is much more better for lead playing. On the cab parameter side, I've got a little bit of a low cut in there to get rid of some of the very, very low end to make it not too boomy. But I've got the thump up a little bit to give it a little more, to keep some of the punch in there, and the decay down to give a tighter speaker sound. The expression pedal is set up so that as you step down on it, it increases the gain. So in the default position with the expression pedal up, it's at 50% gain on that tread plate. As you step down, it slowly takes you to 100. Step down all the way, it'll take you to 100% gain. That way you can experiment with different gain levels when you're playing rhythm. Sometimes I want more of the sound you heard in the intro, where it's not a super heavy distortion, and sometimes I want a little more, so that's what the expression pedal's for. On the Plexi side, I guess what I could point out here, you can see everything is pretty much cranked, which is what you would probably do if you had an old classic Plexi and you wanted to get that classic cranked Marshall sound. On the amp parameter side, I've got the Bias X up a little bit. The Bias X is supposed to recreate the sound of pushing the power tubes, and that's something that, again, a lot of guitar players who are really into tube amps, they really love that pushed power tube sound. It helps things get a little more smooth and buttery. And on the cab parameter side, I've got the low cut up a little bit further to get some of the woofiness out of the amp. So with the mixer, you'll notice that I take the level of the Plexi down quite a bit, and the reason I do that is because you'll notice again that because I cranked that Plexi, the master volume and the channel volume all the way up, that increases the signal a lot too, and I didn't want to have it overpower the tread plate. I wanted them to be somewhat commensurate with each other, so I had to pull back the level in the mixer on the Marshall so it wouldn't drown out the tread plate. After the mixer, we go into the stereo delay. I don't have this set up for a stereo effect. I could have used the standard digital delay, but I had used the stereo delay in an earlier version of this patch to do a little more of a dramatic delay, but right now it's just set up for one repeat. Then we go into the cave reverb, and I started using the cave reverb after I watched Doug Steele in one of his videos explaining one of his patches, and I decided to try it out. Historically, I've always used the plate reverb, which is a sharper sounding reverb, but I really liked the sound Doug was getting. And the thing with the cave reverb is it's really designed for a big cavernous sound. So what I do is I back the mix and I back the decay off quite a bit so that it's not huge and overwhelming, but it's a really nice warm sounding reverb. So here's the sound of this rhythm patch without any other instruments in the way, so you can hear how it sounds direct. And what I'll do is partway through I'll take the gain and I'll crank it up by stepping down on the expression pedal so you can hear what kind of difference that makes. For foot switches, I have the delay on foot switch 2 and the reverb on 3, but again, for the most part when I use this patch, I keep them on the whole time. For the MP hybrid lead patch, I'm using the same core amplifiers again, the tread plate and the Plexi, but I've got them set up very differently. But let's start at the beginning of the chain here. We've got that noise gate again. This time I've got decay and threshold both straight up at 50%, because I don't want to cut back on I want to cut back on noise, but I don't want to cut back too much on the signal. From there we go into the phaser. This is the phaser. There are 5 different phasers available within the HD500 series. 2 of them are based on the classic MXR Phase 90, which oftentimes most of the time I associate with Van Halen, especially on that first album. He used it quite a bit in the early days, but set for a rather subtle phase. It wasn't overpowering in the mix. Of the two phasers available that are based on that MXR Phase 90, there's the script phase, which just like the original, you can only change the speed. But the phaser is also based on the Phase 90, but it allows additional parameters to be changed, which I think is very cool. Now the problem with using the phaser is that it uses more DSP than any of the other phasers. However, in my opinion, it's the best sounding one, and it's worth using if you have the DSP to put it in your chain. But again, when I use this phaser, I don't set it for a very loud and obvious phase. It's more for a subtle phase that just really adds a little more color and texture to your lead playing. Next we go into the amps, and again you'll see some significant differences in the way it's set up. So the expression pedal is set up differently than it was in the rhythm patch. In the rhythm patch, you step down on the expression pedal, it increases gain. Here it's the opposite. So you start with the gain at 100%, and as you step down, it lowers it. And that might seem counterintuitive to people to say, well, why would you do your patches opposite? The reason being is because I want, when the expression pedal's up in the default position, I want that to be my default setting. My default setting for rhythm happens to be the lower rhythm setting, and the default for lead happens to be the higher gain setting. So again, as you step down on the expression pedal, you can pull back on the gain if you want to have more subtle lead playing. Other major differences, the mids of course are a lot higher, which is better for leads. On the amp parameter side, you can see I've got the sag and the bias just cranked on the tread plate. Again, this helps give you more of a, rather than a tighter sound, a more liquidy sound, which is better for leads. That bias X, I got that one cranked up quite a bit too. Now on the cab parameter side, I left the thumb up and the decay down all the way. And you might say, well, why would you want the decay down all the way? That's the tighter sound versus the looser sound. And I've tried it both ways, and I just thought it sounded better this way, so why mess with it? And I've got the resonance cranked up just a little bit too on that to give it a little more cut. On the plexi side, we have some significant differences. First, I want to call out the cab model. I'm not using the greenback 25s like I used on the rhythm patch. I'm using the 412 XXL V30, which is it gives you a little more mid-range, which again is very important for solos in my opinion. I've got the bass pulled back a little bit. On the amp parameter side, sag and bias are cranked again to give you more of a liquidy, fluid lead sound. And I've talked to people who have said, well, I don't really hear much of a difference when I mess around with the sag and the bias. And I think the more you have that master cranked, the more impact the sag and the bias are going to have. And a lot of it is, unless you're doing the extremes all the way up or all the way down, you might not hear a lot of difference. But for me, it's about feel. I can feel the difference in how the guitar responds and the amp modeling responds with those parameters changed. Again, we go into the mixer and we have to pull back on the Marshall so that it doesn't totally overwhelm in the mix. And then from there we go into the stereo delay. This time it is set up for a stereo effect. We've got longer delays this time, and the timing is the same on the delays, but on the left side there's one repeat, and on the right side there are multiple repeats. From there we go into that cave reverb again, this time set for a little bit louder than what you heard in the rhythm patch. So here is the sound of the NP hybrid lead patch with no other accompanying instrument, so you can see how it sounds direct. For foot switches, number 1 turns on and off the phaser, 2 the delay, 3 the reverb. So next here we have 1983 Guitar Center, and this patch I kind of put it together as a joke, although it's kind of fun to use sometimes. What I was trying to do is kind of recreate the sound that I would experience as a kid, walking into a Guitar Center in 1983. I got my first guitar in 1983 on my 12th birthday, and I used to walk down to the Guitar Center in Sherman Oaks, California,
on Ventura Boulevard. For those of you that know which one I'm talking about, this is back when it was in the old location down by Sepulveda, further down west on Ventura. But anyway, you'd walk in and there'd be these guys sitting there in front of an amp with like 10 effect pedals all chained in a row, just completely overdoing it, right? Too much chorus and delay, just everything they could throw in the sync there. I mean, completely overdoing it. Very cliched sound. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's nostalgia or what, but when I play this patch, it puts a smile on my face, goofy smile, because it's just, it may be annoying to some people, but it's kind of fun to play. Here's what we got in the chain. So at first you've got the noise gate, and then you've got the blue comp, based on that old classic Boss compressor sustainer. You got that sustain cranked on that. And you're going into the DoD overdrive, the old DoD preamp overdrive pedal. And I use this one intentionally because it's not a crisp sounding overdrive like you get with the tube driver. It's more of a flat, kind of smooth overdrive, and I thought it worked well with this patch. And then you go into the amps. So on the top we have the Brit J800 based on the Marshall JCM 800, which was a really popular 80s amplifier. And then on the bottom we've got just the preamp section of one of those JCM 800 amps. On the full amp side I got that sag cranked again to help with lead playing. I got the bass, you'll notice, backed off on both of them because I find this JCM, the Brit J800 amp, is a little woofy, so I tend to keep the bass low on it. And then after the amps, on the full amp side, we have a parametric EQ, and then after that you've got the panned phaser based on an old Ibanez phaser. And then back on the other side, on the preamp only Marshall side, we have a digital delay with modulation, and that's basically, it's a digital delay that has like a chorusy effect to the delayed output. It's kind of cool. And then everything gets mixed into a tri-chorus, which is really cool, based on the old Ditronic stereo tri-chorus effect, which is set somewhat exaggerated. I could have gone really overdone. I could have really overdone the chorus effect, but I didn't want a warbly sound. I just wanted a big washy chorus sound. So anyway, like I said, this patch was just for fun, and hopefully you find it entertaining.
Next up are the dual rectifier patches, Heavy Rhythm and Lead. As the name implies, these patches use the tread plate amp model, which, as I mentioned before, is based on the Mesa Boogie dual rectifier head. It's actually my favorite amp model in the HD500 series, and if I wasn't able to use 2 amps at once, or I was just relegated to using only 1 amp, it would be the tread plate. Also, I want to mention that the riff you just heard there, that little sound clip, I actually wrote that riff, I was 18, so like around 1989-ish, and then I found an old recording of a band I was in a couple years later, and I took the bass and drum part of it and I looped it and then just recorded over it some fresh guitars, so that was kind of fun to do. But anyway, first up is the dual rectifier Heavy Rhythm patch. First in the chain we have a noise gate, which is always on. You can see again the decay pulled back to tighten up the noise level and the signal, which I like to do for rhythm playing. Next we go into the amps, and you can see the expression pedal set up once again to control the gain level. Like the MP Hybrid rhythm patch, gain in the default setting is a little more moderate, and as you step down on it, it eventually goes to about 100%. I will call out that you can see in the amp parameters that I have the sag and the bias settings pulled back all the way, which again is good for tightening up the sound. And on the cab parameters side, you can see that I have the low cut dialed in a little bit to take out some of the boominess. thump is up quite a bit and the decay is down to give a tighter, more punchy speaker sound. And then the resonance is also cranked up to put a little more bite back into the tone, which sometimes I find is necessary when you do all those aforementioned steps to kind of tighten up the sound. No need to cover the mixer, nothing special going on there. But before the mixer, we have the Harmonizer, based on the Eventide H3000 Harmonizer, classic Harmonizer from the 80s. First intelligent Harmonizer back in the 80s. And you might ask, aren't Harmonizers intended for leads, and why have it here on a rhythm patch? Well, first, I never play chords through the Harmonizer. That's always going to sound like shit, because the Harmonizer doesn't pick all the notes out properly. It only works well, and it's intended for single notes. So if I'm playing a riff with just a bunch of single notes, no chords, sometimes I like to kick in the Harmonizer to do stuff like this. I've got the default harmony set for E minor and a minus fourth because it's just a dark sounding harmony, which I like for metal playing. It's not dissonant sounding though, but it's got kind of an edgy feel to it. If I want something a little more melodic, I like plus third harmony. It's always nice, but obviously, you're going to change the Harmonizer to fit whatever key and sound you're going for. You'll notice that I placed the Harmonizer before the mixer, and it appears that it's on only one channel, the right channel, because it's down below. However, it's not only in one channel. When I run it through the mixer, I have both channels panned straight down the center, so the Harmonizer shows up in both speakers. I placed it here as opposed to after the mixer because I just thought it sounded better here. I never put the Harmonizer before the amp. That always sounds crappy. So you need to experiment yourself with where you want to place it. After the mixer, we go into the Opto Tremolo effect. This effect is modeled after the optical tremolo circuit found in early blackface Fender amps. I remember the first amp I ever owned was a Fender Princeton from the 60s, which I sold like an idiot when I wanted some new gear as a teenager. Lesson learned. But that thing had a built-in tremolo effect, and even though I didn't really use it that often, it really was warm sounding, and I think this Opto Tremolo effect really captures that. I use it occasionally for kind of staccato-like flutter effect like this. And obviously you need to change the speed to fit the song you were playing. Next up is the AC flanger, which is based on the classic MXR flanger for kind of some old school flange chugging. Now when I place the flanger after the mixer, which is where, in my opinion, it usually sounds best, it results in an overall signal boost to the level, especially the low end. However, I don't want a signal boost when I kick it in. I want it to be kind of evenly leveled. So what I do is I place the graphic EQ right behind it that is meant to be used only when the flanger is on. And basically what it does is it takes the signal back down to a comparable level to when the flange is not being used. But there is a tiny bit of tone shaping going on. We've got the very low end, the 80 hertz, is pulled back even further than the other frequencies are pulled back to compensate for the additional bass that the flanger was adding. And the 1.1K mid frequency is not pulled back as much because I like to have a little more of that somewhat crisp mids in the flange. It may look like the 1.1 is pulled just back as far as the others, but it's a -1 decibel cut as opposed to a -2. It's kind of hard to see there, but you'll see it when you actually use the patch. Then we have a digital delay, and like the delay used in the MP Hybrid Rhythm patch, it's set for only one repeat. And I typically only use this delay when I'm playing kind of relatively slow, non-complex rhythm stuff. Otherwise things get muddy when you're trying to play fast metal stuff that's got a lot of notes and everything. Then finally a K reverb set up like it was in the MP Hybrid patch for a little extra depth. But again, just like the delay, and I use it only with the delay, it's usually reserved for more laid-back rhythm stuff where things aren't very busy. For controllers, foot switch number 1 turns on and off the flanger with its accompanying EQ. Number 2 turns on and off the tremolo effect, number 3 the harmonizer, and number 4 the reverb and delay. Okay, so here's the dual rectifier lead patch, and in a minute I'm going to show you how to get how to use this patch to get some kind of funky, kind of futuristic sound like this. First in the chain is the noise gate, which is always on, and you can see that I have the threshold on it in the default setting pulled back a little bit, which kind of opens it up, allows for a little more sustain. Be careful with that threshold. If you pull it back too far, you're going to let too much noise in, so you got to find the right spot for it. And the expression pedal does change the threshold setting. It does turn it up to the 12 o'clock position, which tightens up the sound a little bit as you step down on the expression pedal, and that'll make sense in a minute when I explain what else the expression pedal does. From there we go into the phaser again, the one that I love, again set up for a rather subtle phase. And then we go right into the amp, again the tread plate amp, and the expression pedal is set up again to control the gain. Like the MP hybrid lead patch, the gain is decreased as you step down on the expression pedal. So in the default setting, expression pedal up, the gain is just cranked, and if you want to pull back a little and have a little have less of an aggressive lead tone, just step down on that expression pedal. It takes the gain down to about 50%. And then the reason I had the noise gate set up to pull back on the threshold is to also kind of give it a more tightened, compressed lead sound if you want to pull back a little. So just like the MP hybrid lead patch, you can see in the amp parameters section that the sag and the bias are cranked all the way up. Bias sax is cranked pretty high, again to help give you a smoother, more liquidy feeling liquid tone. And with the cab parameters, again you can see the low cut is dialed in a little bit more than on the rhythm patch to again get rid of some of that very low end, which makes it kind of boomy, or takes out some of the boominess. And then I have got the resonance cranked up around 71% to add some crispness, much needed crispness into the lead patch. After the amp, you can see on the top channel, which is the left channel, I've got a parametric EQ, which I threw in there to add a little bit more focused mids and high end into the mix, which helps for lead playing. And just like the rhythm patch, though, both of these channels, left and right, are panned straight down the center, so you hear the parametric EQ in both speakers. But I put it only on one side because I found that if I put it after the mixer, it was a little too overwhelming, and I didn't want it before the amp. That just doesn't sound good in my opinion when you do that. The other side, other channel, again panned straight down the center, we have that harmonizer again. And I've got the harmonizer set up with the same default settings, the E minor and -4th. But again, obviously you change that around as needed. And as mentioned, my favorite harmonies are the -4th or the +3rd. You heard the -4th at the end of the sound clip, the beginning of this patch section, but you'll hear it again in a minute. For the mixer, you can see that the left channel is pulled back 6 decibels and the right channel 3 decibels. The left channel is the parametric EQ side and the right is the harmonizer side. Again, I've got them panned right down the center so you hear them in both speakers, but I needed to kind of find the right level, the mix between the two. And there's a decibel cut on both sides because I've got the master volume cranked up a little bit on the amp, and sometimes you need to pull back on the levels if you want it to be more evenly fitting with your other patch levels. After that, we go into the Opto Tremolo effect again. For lead playing, I like to have a faster tremolo effect when I use it, and I'll show you how I use the tremolo effect in just a minute. I don't use it that often for lead playing, but it can provide some interesting dynamics. I'll show you that in a sec. Then from there we go into stereo delay, which is set up similar to the MP hybrid lead patch with 1 repeat in the left speaker and a few repeats in the right speaker. And then finally we have that cave reverb again for some added depth to the sound. So here is the lead tone, and I've got everything on except for the tremolo and the harmonizer. And for this sound bite, I'll kick in the harmonizer after a little bit. You can hear that too. now I want to show you how I incorporate the tremolo effect. And I should point out that when using the tremolo effect, picking a lot of notes is not going to sound very good. The percussiveness of the pick hitting the strings can come across rather choppy, and it sounds much smoother when you just do hammer-ons, pull-offs, or even tapping. I showed you a patch previously in another video called Engl Metal Machine where I did this trick that involves lots of open string pull-offs when using the Harmonizer, and when you time it right, it sounds pretty cool and synth-like. And here's what that prior sound sounded like. So now with this new patch, I have the tremolo rate much faster, but the concept is the same. You know, just do lots of hammer-ons and pull-offs for a smooth sound. And here's an example. So the funky sound you heard at the end there, it's much easier than it looks. You may have looked at it and said, it looks like a bunch of gibberish. Well, it primarily is a bunch of gibberish. The way the harmonizer is set up and the phaser and the tremolo, it just creates this weird sound where all you got to do is really hit the strings and you get these weird sounds that come out of it. Like watch when I do just this percussive hitting of the strings without fretting anything. So you already have that sound just by hitting the strings, and then just by randomly hitting notes, you just start to these weird little notes get added in, and it just creates this funky robotic type sound. So it's very easy to do. Next time you have friends over, or you can even make your own video and just kind of show it off like you're doing something much more difficult than you really are. I have a lot of fun with it. I've also been experimenting more lately with getting strange sounds out of the HD500. So there will be a follow-up video to this one in the near future with a bunch of those patches, so stay tuned if you like that kind of stuff. For foot switches, number 1 turns on and off the phaser, number 2 the Opto Tremolo, number 3 the Harmonizer, and 4 turns off on and off both the delay and the reverb together. Okay, I just realized I'm about 35 minutes into this video, so I want to take a break here. I've got more patches I want to share with you, but I'm going to do that via a different video so you can take a break from this. And next time I won't be as talkative, and I should explain why I have been. I don't want to just say, here's the patches, do you like them, go use them. I mean, I hope you do, but also I'm trying to share with you some of the concepts and techniques that I use and that I've learned about since the last time I've done one of these videos, so you can put together your own patches and use some of the same concepts. So the next video, it'll have a clean patch, it'll have an old school kind of thrash metal patch, it'll have a funk patch with some different sounds. So hopefully you'll enjoy those too, and until next time, rock on.